Haven't even gotten started yet. Clearly the previous pitch was that great. Good morning. As Chris mentioned, I'm Arjuna Rivera, the I2 Lab Senior Manager and Principal Researcher at Lockheed Martin. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about our journey. For those who are familiar with Lockheed Martin, we're going to talk about what we're doing in support, not necessarily just of our customer, but what we're doing from an enterprise standpoint. So 2 years ago, I sat right where you guys were sitting. Didn't know much about Docker as a company, had some familiarity with container technology, and wanted to know more. After this federal or government summit, I left inspired. So inspired that immediately reached out to Chris and others on how do we get started. So that's our secret project, #BigWhale, and our beginning of an unexpected journey at Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin, we're 97,000 strong from an employee standpoint. We're over 40 nations, and we're a 100-year-old company. So as you can imagine, we're rich in heritage from a global security, innovation, as well as aerospace company. But much like any other 100-year-old company, we have a strong culture. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about culture and hopefully something that you all can identify with. So who here would say that culture eats almost everything for breakfast? Anyone ever heard that? With a 100-year-old plus company, our culture is one of, if it's working, why fix it? Our culture is process is everything. Meeting compliance, meeting governance, are keys to success. And a lot of that is translated in how we manage IT, where our folks are, if it ain't broke, why fix it? What's wrong with how we've been running IT or delivering services? Hopefully the answer is there's a lot wrong with that. Our CIO has prioritized migrating to cloud. I think you've heard in the earlier conversations and the earlier topics how today cloud migration and moving into cloud is an imperative across many of us within industry. But not just migrating to cloud, it's how do we improve, how do we do better on our apps and our infrastructure. So we started taking thought leaders within the company, within primarily our infrastructure, our apps, our security, and really developing a concept of exploration. We took our, what's advancing from a technology standpoint. We looked at where is the industry going from a market direction perspective. But most importantly, what is our business asking for? What is their need? And from a Venn diagram perspective, we landed in exploration. Exploration is going to be one of the keys to really accelerating how do we migrate, how do we move to cloud. And through that discussion, we needed an innovation center or some sort of innovation incubator, which we affinitively called I2 Labs for infrastructure and international, with the hopes of, through exploration, lab testing, and development, that we would be able to define new services and new capabilities for our enterprise. So I2 Labs for the win. We did something very different. It was almost revolutionary at Lockheed Martin. We have innovation types of organizations that focus on IRADs. We have areas called innovation garages where we support employees kind of coming together and thinking through new ideas, practical applications, things that they may be working on. But we've never had something that was born in cloud, out of cloud, and raised in cloud. And that's where I2 Labs sits. I love it when I'm on calls and people ask me, so where are your labs? Where are you located? Are you in a major site? And I'm like, no, we're everywhere. And they look at me and they're like, stop messing with me. Seriously, where are you guys located? I'm like, seriously, we're everywhere, right? We're ethereal, and that really gets them pissed off. What do you mean ethereal? I2 Labs, as I mentioned, is born out of cloud. Our cloud service provider, our CSP of choice today is AWS. So we're in AWS regions east, we're in west, as well as in GovCloud. And when our priority from our CIO is cloud first, fail fast, rapid experimentation, and just like the Goonies, never say die type of attitude. But with a 100-year-old company, we had to right-size a lot of our processes and work closely with our organizations on how to do things differently. So a lot of our success coming out of I2 Labs was just those things. First, rapid stand-up, right? We're in a culture today where our employees, our organizations, our programs have become accustomed to some of the red tape. I'm hoping some of you identify with this. It's not okay. Weeks to months to stand up a piece of code, to stand up a particular service, is just not okay. Today, we're in the frame of mind where we have to do it faster. We have to accelerate it because the business is demanding it. So rapid stand-up was a key tenet in developing I2 Labs. Resources, key. Having skilled individuals, again, with a can-do attitude, willing to break down barriers, willing to not take no for an answer, willing to kind of go the extra mile was key in bringing in resources into labs from an exploration standpoint. Funding was a big one. Being able to convince our leadership that this is the right thing, this is what's needed, was key. Demonstrating this is the how. With these investments and these types of platforms and capabilities, this is the way that we're able to accelerate what we're doing today. And then finally, our partnerships. Massive. Don't underestimate the work that's involved in developing your partnerships with your internal organizations. Global supply chain, huge. We are now BFFs across the board. Being able to take all our NDA, PIA processes and just accelerate it was huge. Our legal, our corporate information security, our international trade and compliance organizations, and finally our vendor management. I mean, I'm not sure if you guys have had this experience, but when you try to do business with a vendor, small to medium, and they're not a traditional, Microsoft or Oracle, or there's a lot of work that's involved. Getting them through ExoStar, getting them to understand our way of onboarding vendors and being able to do, contract negotiations and so forth. Again, building that frictionless type of process was a huge enabler in what we were doing in I2 Labs. So why Docker? This is kind of our Docker Enterprise Edition, I'll put it that way. Again, 2 years ago, when I first came, we were just beginning to think of what's the breakthrough technology? What's going to be that vehicle, that platform that we can really get all the different disciplines around to support our needs and how we're going to migrate to cloud? So first was the change in business. For those who may not be in manufacturing or operations, we're beginning to see the blending of information technology and operations technology. So the ERPs, the PLMs, there's a desire to do more from an IT and OT perspective than there ever has been. So that was one area that we started seeing if we can introduce cloud and a platform that would really enable our manufacturing and accelerate product development, product build, it would be huge for the corporation. We also are seeing that programs wanted to be more self-sufficient, more independent. And that's where we started seeing containerization and cloud being enablers to be more self-sufficient, as we're seeing our business models changing. The second was getting us to cloud. So I mentioned a little bit before on the focus on modernization of our applications and infrastructure. Docker Enterprise brought just that. When we talk about apps and refactoring our applications, the need for portability, right? I'm sure you're all familiar with the build, ship, run mantra, hopefully. Ingrain it, where our developers are able to develop code that runs on their workstations, ship it to our data center infrastructure, our enterprise group, and have it run exactly the way they want it. It was unheard of. Previous, they would develop code, go to run it, something would be different. Different libraries, different platform OSs, you name it. Things did not work. So it took testing, retesting, multiple levels of testing just to run the same piece of code that worked just fine in their development workstation, but now within our data center environment. We're hoping to eliminate that with Docker. The customer requirements to run code on-prem. So again, our first part or first phase of this story is running out of cloud. We do work, our major customer is on the government side. They have requirements to run solely on-prem, no cloud allowed, if you will. No problem. Docker Enterprise, container technology. It's offering us the portability to say, what CSP do you want to run on? Do you want to run on AWS, our choice? Do you need to run on Azure? We could do that too. Do you want to run it on-prem? We could stand up our own cluster on-prem. So absolutely, the portability of the Docker platform is a big enabler when we talk hybrid cloud. And then decomposition of our monolithic platforms, again, to our microservices. We have thousands of enterprise applications that are ripe for refactoring to serve a microservices framework where we can then easily run them out of our Docker cluster. So why Docker? Our DevOps journey. Much like that was said earlier, and much like I'm hoping many of you, you're on a move away from waterfall methodology to an agile framework. Start looking at how you bring your developers and your operations teams together to become one. Full stack development, full stack engineering. Again, Docker is key in how we are bringing those organizations together and how we are developing our DevOps story. So part of what we're doing is developing a CaaS, right? Containers as a service or containerization as a service. And we're talking to our enterprise programs who are saying, I'm tired of managing my own infrastructure. I'm tired of having multiple repositories of code. Can we do one? Can we just get along? Absolutely. So not give too much credit to Docker and the company and the platform. We're doing a lot of work too, but that's part of the story. We are energizing them to say, yes, we can have an enterprise service, a shared model that will benefit all our businesses and our programs. Last but not least, the container platforms running across the corporation. So as I mentioned, why are we looking at Docker specifically? We have a lot of container-based platforms out there. We're running some RHEL, right? OpenShift, a little bit of Kubernetes. But from an enterprise standpoint, we wanted to go pure play. We want to be as holistic as possible and just go with the authorities when you look at Docker Inc., and when you look at containers as a platform, the OCI, right, the Open Container Standard, OCS. So we wanted to go out of the box, native as possible. Also, some of the security controls and orchestration and management tools were just built in, right? Batteries included, I think it was. If you want different batteries, you can swap them out, right? And finally, giving our businesses a way to integrate at an enterprise level. Integrating their CI/CD, their continuous integration, their continuous deployment pipelines. Start looking at refactoring their applications and moving forward. So this is our I2 Labs life cycle from discovery to service delivery. And this is kind of going to be our roadmap for the remaining of the presentation. I'll highlight briefly, all of this is brand new. We developed this from scratch, just like I2 Labs. As following more of an agile framework methodology, we wanted to focus on what steps are key to rolling out an enterprise service. So discovery is where we identify our experiments, we talk about our definitions, our evaluations, and then our reviews prior to going into our development phase. Discovery was huge because not only does it give us kind of the runway and the bandwidth to not only understand what we have to do, but understand the technology so that we can sell it to our leadership before it even gets to our development phase. So real briefly, discovery leads to development, then our alpha phase, we do some more testing in our beta, get into our general availability or GA, and most importantly, and not to forget, as part of that life cycle, we want to reduce tech debt. We want to deprecate some of our legacy applications and hopefully finally retire them as we insert new technology. Now, most of you probably have seen IT service delivery where it's a set it and forget it type of mentality, right? Do all the hard work up front, get it running, and then it's supposed to just run on its own. It doesn't work that way. We're finding that we have so much tech debt, legacy applications that we need to really look at how do we introduce new service delivery. So with Docker, with DevOps, with Agile, we want to start focusing on iteration, right? Feature releases, being able to demonstrate that we are understanding our customer requirements in close to near time and planning out how do we iterate to our release, our 1.0 release, to our 1.1, 1.2, et cetera. So a little bit about discovery. Sorry, it's cutting off a little bit. As I mentioned, we first started just here 2 years ago in this room and talked to Chris and Brian and team on how do we get this going. We know we want to do Docker Enterprise. Can you help us? So we worked out what was called the Docker Acceleration Program, lightweight 10-node program. It included architecture support as well as solutions engineering type of support. Went into contract with Docker, met down in our Crystal City office. Not sure if Andy is in here, Clemenco, but 2.5 days and we were up and running. We had pre-built our cluster, went ahead and layered the enterprise software, and away we went. Our internal team, my team, started building expertise around UCP, Universal Control Plane, DTR, Docker Trusted Registry, what worker nodes meant, what management nodes meant, and just being able to run it ourselves within our labs. Kind of the second part to not only getting the platform up and running within labs was training. We contracted with multiple organizations to start training our people. We had folks in operations and development that really didn't understand what Docker was or what containers really were. So a lot of training had to go forward. But that was one of the most critical areas needed at Lockheed Martin. Not only, though, did we focus on IT folks, right, our application disciplines, our security disciplines, our infrastructure, but we invited our business areas, our programs, those who are already running containers either on OpenShift or Kubernetes, to expose them to what we're looking to do with Docker and from an enterprise service perspective. Coming together, bringing the right minds to understand what we're trying to do as a corporation. And then finally was marketing, okay? Marketing was huge. We did tech talks, webcasts, leadership briefings was big. Imagine trying to explain Docker and containers to some of our executive leadership. I mean, it was fun. It was fun. But at the end of the day, they kind of got, this is going to save me money. This is going to help us get to cloud. This is going to push our DevOps and some of our agile imperatives. All right, let's do it. I don't know exactly what you were talking about, Arjuna, but you had some good charts, and I like where you're going. So the next phase within our life cycle was development. And this is where the rubber met the road, right? Everything in labs and everything in our discovery phase was all art of the possible. At the end of our discovery phase, we have what's called the discovery ATP, or authorization to proceed. And quite simply, it's, is this initiative, is this something that we want to continue to invest in, right? A little bit of money in labs, resources, contract dollars and so forth. Now it's a matter of, okay, we want to make this real. So we have an organization within I2, it's called Data Center Infrastructure, and their leadership, their program leadership, accepted moving Docker into the development phase. Now we're really going to start delivering containers as a service. The upfront was, let's start building a team that includes engineering, so security engineering, program engineering, systems engineering. We needed architects. We needed program managers, you name it. And this also was the first time that this organization was building what's called an ADT, an Agile Development Team. So we had a lot going on. First, ADT, new technology that not many people knew or understood about. Trying to do this in cloud. I'm surprised that it really made it through at first. They were like, okay, maybe we're trying to bite on too much. But we pushed on. We provided expertise, internal support from our labs organization to the data center infrastructure, DCI ADT. We had Docker solution engineering support every step of the way, and we're able to develop the next chart. So this is meant to be more of a transformational type of topic. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on our architecture here. But this is our simple GovCloud instance of our Docker Enterprise cluster. We have key components, our UCP, our DTR, our worker nodes. We're leveraging native Amazon AWS services, so S3, EBS on the storage front, RDS from a database standpoint. And most importantly, we partnered with other vendors. Aqua for security and Sysdig from a performance standpoint. The one thing I really want to highlight as part of this chart that I'm hoping you all take away from this is that if you think your traditional security services and performance monitoring services are going to work right out of the box in this type of architecture, I heard the chuckle. You know what's wrong. we would have battle after battle after battle of why can't we use all our traditional tools? Why can't we scan these containers? They didn't get it. Luckily, through the discovery and development process, we were able to educate and show that when we look at modernizing these types of infrastructure and platforms, we also need to modernize our security tools. We need to modernize our performance tools. Major, major change in thinking as well as in our culture when you look at what we're doing from a Docker enterprise perspective. So, gone through discovery, went through development. We're in AWS GovCloud. Now it's time for alpha testing. So through this whole phase, through the marketing, through the discovery, through the development, we picked up a lot of excitement. We picked up programs who were like, hey, I'm doing containers now. I'm tired of running infrastructure. What's your go live date? We said, come and join us. Be an early adopter. Help us in our alpha testing. Fail fast, rapid experimentation. So we had programs on contract, bringing in test pipelines, bringing their test images, running their containers out of our Docker cluster, seeing a lot of success, and just again, working together to offer an enterprise service. Once we had finished kind of our alpha testing, we went ahead and went into beta. This is the step where we started working with our production, our enterprise packaging teams. So our SCMs, right? SCM teams to package Docker for Windows, Docker for Mac. More training, more marketing, bringing the non-early adopters, actual end users, some customers into our Docker cluster and seeing a tremendous amount of success. Don't skip these. Alpha, beta were huge in identifying what we needed to do internally and managing our development pipelines, our pipelines, what we're doing from an operations standpoint. When you look at running an enterprise service, what is the new tooling? Tell us about what's happening, right? And how do we optimize what we're doing? Very important. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit to talk about one use case. Hopefully we have enough time to go through it. But this was a watershed moment for us. I won't go too much into augmented reality. I'm hoping that everybody gets, right? Virtual reality, your total environment is virtual. Augmented, you're still in the real world using some sort of heads-up display, phone, iPad, some other screen to do some sort of overlay, right, of what's real, right? You're augmenting your environment, so you're adding to your environment. For about 6 or 7 months, we had an organization within Lockheed Martin called Corporate Engineering Program Office. They're responsible for some innovation type technologies, and their focus mid last year was augmented reality and working with a product called Remote AR, where the use case is we can have someone, an engineer, shop floor attendant, technician, actually on the flight line, so F-35, F-16, C-130, right, if we're focusing on aerospace, if we're in space, our Orion program. And if they run into some technical issue or question, if they're in the field as well, instead of having to bring an expert into the field or on site, they could just call. So remote AR is similar to FaceTime, right? So you have two-way video. But what's also nice about remote AR is that you can mark up, two-way markup. So you can actually circle, a widget or a bolt or something that you are working on to the receiving end. So use case goes this way. We have someone on the flight line, something doesn't look right. I need to call, I'm in aeronautics, something doesn't look right on the flight line. I need some expertise, help out of our say, Northern California site. So instead of the delay of bringing someone out to take a look at it, they can do a remote AR session, mark up what the technician is seeing. Someone at their desk in Northern California can take a look and say, yeah, this is the problem, and mark it up. So our corporate engineering program office just wanted to get a simple Docker container up and running within our infrastructure so that we can use this software. Through technical difficulties, through leadership difficulties, and just some turmoil, it took about 6 to 7 months, and they still didn't have an answer. So they decided to go on their own and buy a license of Docker. And fortunately, the work that we had done with our global supply chain paid off. They answered the call and said, hey, Arjuna and Labs, they already have licenses. They're already running Enterprise Edition. Why do you want to buy another license? And they're like, all right, give me their name. So they brought them to us, and we said, yeah, absolutely. We can help you. We'd love to help you. We're looking for more people. We're in alpha stage. We're in beta. We'd love to help you out. And they were like, okay, so how long? Are we talking weeks or months to get this running? And my team, my project engineer at the time was like, weeks or months? Do it in 2 days. And they were like, they used some colorful words to say, we don't believe you. And we said, okay, let's make a bet. We bet you that we can get this up and running in 2 days. And that's just a gentle person's bet, nothing else to it. And within 48 hours, we had it up and running. Now, in truth, it took about a week to get it fully up and running, because again, we're having to work with firewalls and networking, logistics, and things like that. So we were in a queue to get ports open and so forth. But our corporate engineering program office was blown away. They were like, we've never engaged IT before and had this type of response. A lot of what we were able to do there was some of our thought leadership on I2 and labs, but a lot of it too was with Docker and being ahead of the game, if you will, knowing where the business needs will be. So as I wind down, what I've talked to you about is our Docker EE in cloud. That has been kind of our phase 1 or our part 1 of our journey. Okay, from discovery to beta to which the phases we're in right now. We're not stopping there though. We're developing a reference architecture for an on-premise cluster of Docker. Again, DoD is our primary customer. We do have some commercial and international customers. So it's important to understand what those requirements look like. And right now, today, we're seeing a lot of workloads required to be on-prem. Again, Docker being a key technology to help us. What you code will be able to run in cloud as well as on-prem. We're also focused on Docker on Windows so that we can now support our .NET developers. Right? Today, we get a lot of complaints about, I don't want to refactor my .NET code to .NET Core. Okay. Well, with Windows containers, Hyper-V containers, we're looking for the opportunity for our developers to not have to refactor their code and just run their code native on Docker on our Windows platform. And then finally, we're getting asked for Docker Unclassified. Today, a lot of development, and I know there's multiple flavors of low side, high side, but I'm just going to keep it at that level. Today, our developers are looking at better ways to migrate their code into their classified or closed areas. We're looking to build a reference architecture where we can stamp across all our business areas and ultimately provide it as a service. So with that, this was a primer for June DockerCon briefing. I'm going to have a lot more content in that briefing, so if you're planning to attend, please feel free to stop by that session. I'll have some videos, cool videos, and most importantly, be on the lookout for phase 2 of when we are in GA, general availability. We'll be doing webinars, as well as our phase 3, when we talk full optimization, deprecation, and retirement of our enterprise applications, and overall what our story looks like as we migrate to cloud. So thank you. And if this story kind of was compelling to you, come and talk to me. Absolutely. That would be great.
If you guys have any questions, we've got a few minutes for that.
So there are two big things when trying to bring on adopters. One is how you help them manage pipelines. And I had a second question about, you have an alpha, beta, and you didn't talk about it too much, but there's a deprecated section that you had. How do you manage deprecation, and how do you manage version releases? Are they feature-based? And how do they relate to the tags?
Yep, so good question. So I'll start with the last one. So right now, we, from a corporation standpoint, are only up to our beta testing phase. So we haven't gotten to our GA or deprecation or retirement phase. That's a to be state. But we are looking to focus more on feature releases, as part of that. So if you don't mind, kind of stay plugged in to phase 2 when we're actually in GA later this year, and then focusing on what applications that are being migrated, right, refactored into our cluster, so that we can start having some dialogue on the deprecation and retirement as part of our phase 3. So stay tuned from that. Thank you. And then I believe your earlier question, can you?
When you have a lot of folks trying to adopt, they have different testing scenarios, they have different methodologies, they have different testing systems. And I know you were an adopter of Aqua. That's really great to hear. What were some ways that you were able to abstract away the snowflake kind of scenarios that come with adopting folks?
Yep, okay, great, so thank you. Yeah, so as I mentioned, to your point, we're a massive company. So we have organizations that have test engineers, we have folks that are, more into some of the manufacturing, right? So some of their test methodologies as well. From a development standpoint, we're focusing on how do we do, red-blue type of testing, bringing in different testing methodologies so that we're really, I don't want to say appeasing, but we're really applying these types of methodologies throughout the course of some of this testing. So I didn't go into much detail around that, but from an alpha and beta testing perspective, we're allowing our different programs to really follow their testing methodologies, but at a top level, from an enterprise standpoint, we're more focused on the operational side of the house. Can we meet the needs, from a service uptime, things like that. So short answer, various methodologies are kind of incorporated in the alpha beta testing, but from an enterprise standpoint, we're focused on our metrics, we're focused on performance, and most importantly, security when we talk about workload migrations of DFARS related data, any type of CUI, CDI type of data. So those have been our focus areas on a testing standpoint. Thank you.
So I've been a fan of Aqua since I saw them in 2016, and they've done a lot of great work. I haven't had the privilege to get to use the tool in production. Not that you guys have anyone in production yet, but you are using the tool and seeing a lot of information coming out of it. Yeah. From the perspective of a larger enterprise, what are some values that you're seeing that pertain to you that kind of caught your eye?
Yeah, no, great question. So, so for those who are not familiar, Aqua, also offers runtime, right? Container runtime information. So I think that's been key. And I don't know, if anyone else has, feel free to chime in. But when we look at Aqua, we're looking at a few things, right? So out of the box, Docker does CVE checks, right? Okay, so it's a little bit redundant when we talk about Aqua in that sense. But for us, the main component has been some of the image scanning as well as the actual runtime scanning that's being performed within our Docker cluster. So to date, we're seeing a lot of information about what Aqua produces from a reporting standpoint. We haven't gotten in a sense of what's going to be some of the policies that we really want to apply to it, right? So we're kind of open. We're running it open to see what's that data feed look like? What are we getting? What can we learn, right? What's important to us when we talk about lateral movement concerns, right? Or source code that may be, either out of date, right, or vulnerable. What kind of policies and thresholds do we want to apply? So that's been our primary focus through the alpha beta testing, is really looking at policy management so that we can know, take some of what we do today from an existing tool standpoint, and how do we apply what makes sense into the Docker cluster using Aqua as kind of being that law enforcement, if you will, type of product to meet our requirements from an enterprise service standpoint. Hopefully I answered a little bit, but right now we're focusing on policies and so forth.
I think we have one more question for you. We'll wrap up.
Yeah, for your on-premise reference architecture,
Yes.
Are you guys considering using appliances or containers on bare metal, or are you using sort of a standard hardware OS virtualization stack?
Yeah, so for our on-prem, we're testing just bare metal instances with I believe like a CentOS, type of for our Linux side, and then of course Server 2016. I don't recall if we're doing Nano or Core for it. Not at the hardware level. So primarily we're abstracting, our Windows Server 2016 instance on top of I think it's CentOS that we're running on. Yep. Any others?
We're good. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much.